So group work is like a deep passion of mine because of that. And I just think it can be such a powerful experience for people to feel like they're being heard and people are witnessing their experiences, and for them to also witness and hear from other people's experiences too. And so tonight I'm going to be talking and highlighting some positive parenting strategies and some nuggets from a few that I'll talk about. And then I'm hoping that, we'll also have some time for some questions and answers and comments, and that as well. So please use the chat throughout. I don't know how responsive I will be, because I'll be I'll have the presentation going on for a bit, but I do really appreciate the feedback. So emojis or comments, anything like that, please do. And then any questions, I'll try to either answer them throughout the presentation, or just even save it till the end, till after. So yeah, so I'll share my screen now. Any questions about any of that before we get started? Okay, I'll just pull this up here. Okay, can everyone see this okay? All right. Okay, so these are the positive parenting strategies that I'll be talking about tonight. So special time, strengthening our compassionate voice, emotion coaching, and I'll touch a little bit briefly on effective instructions and limit setting. But very briefly, I'll just mention that now. So I'm hoping, my best hope for tonight is that this is useful somewhat for you all, that you'll get something out of this tonight. I will be talking about, why these things are important, why each of them, the difference that each of these strategies can make, and a few practical tips to try to incorporate these into your day-to-day or week-to-week. And you know what? For some of you, or many of you, or all of you, these might not be new for you. You may be yeah, I know this stuff already. I'm already doing a lot of this. And so maybe this will be more of a reminder of the things that you're already doing, which is great, or reminders of things that maybe you were doing before and maybe could be doing again. And maybe some of the stuff will be new. But I'm hoping there is something that you'll be able to take away. And like I said too, we'll have some time for question and answer at the end. The other thing that I'll just speak to about the positive parenting strategies and why I'm coming at it from this angle is because there is lots of evidence that shows that really trying to focus in on the positive parenting tools and using these very liberally, there's evidence to show that then improves family cohesion, parent-child relationship. It mitigates those disruptive behaviors, those more challenging behaviors. It's a proactive way. So in parenting, a lot of the things that we're doing is reactive. The positive parenting tools, though, is a more proactive approach. So it's trying to get ahead of those, let's say, a lot of those challenging times that we all do experience. So the positive parenting tools really just help us to build on that strong foundation that we are working so hard as parents to have for our kids and for our families. Hey, Eddie. So let's get started. Just before I start talking about special time, I just want to acknowledge, obviously, that we have all been parenting in a pandemic for the last 2 years. And so I know this is stating the absolute obvious, but I just think it's important to acknowledge this and also acknowledge that parenting without a pandemic or without a very challenging and trying time, it's already challenging. There's already all these decisions we have to make. There's already all this information that's coming at us that we're trying to filter through. And there's a lot of balls that we are juggling and competing, a lot of competing demands. And then you add the pandemic, and this kind of experience of this yo-yo where we get put into one situation, then we try to make some sort of sense or routine out of it, and then we get thrown into like another situation, and then it's just this like back and forth and these new situations that are coming up every so often, and even more decisions to make and even more balls to juggle. So it's been really hard, and I think we've all been experiencing a lot of hard times. There was much more that I think needed to be mentioned about I just more want to basically be saying, like, just remembering to give yourself credit for all the work that you are doing, and especially during this time and all the challenges that are being thrown at us. It's really important to help give ourselves credit, even just the small things that we are doing in our day to day. Okay. So special time. What do I mean by special time? Exactly. This is one of the positive parenting strategies, and one of the, again, a foundational strategy. And sometimes I usually encourage parents and families to think about, if you're noticing there's like lots of challenges in your days today with parenting, and there's a lot of challenging behaviors coming at you, I usually encourage parents and myself to check in about, okay, where's your special time at? Where is that time? How is that going? And how much of that are you getting with your child? How much of that one-on-one quality time are you getting with your child? So by special time, I mean, again, one-on-one. Typically, we would suggest 10 to 15 minutes every day. Now, I know that can maybe seem like a lot to people, and it can be really hard to get that time in. So if that seems like it's too much, then trying to see, what I don't know if anyone has their mic on, but if anybody can mute, that would be great. But yeah, so what I was saying was that it's about 10 to 15 minutes every day. And if you can't do that, try to think about what's realistic and what can you do in your week. This one-on-one time is child directed. So it's not a time when you're going to take the lead and say what it is that maybe you'd like to do during that time. It's really trying to give your child put them in the driver's seat. They can decide what it is that you're going to do for that 10 to 15 minutes together. And if they're little, if they're 2, or if they're less than 2, or maybe the verbal skills aren't there, no matter what their age is, just knowing what their interests are, and when they are doing something, trying to get to the level and be very focused and attentive for those 10 to 15 minutes, and that there's no other distractions. And I know that is extremely difficult, and that is a major barrier to having this be a regular time, especially if there's multiple kids in the home, and you have, there's lots of other demands. But really trying to see if you can focus for that 10 minutes on that one child in particular, and that it's a positive time. So, it's not a time to be saying any criticisms or trying to give instructions during that time, or asking lots and lots of questions. It's really just trying to put the focus on, okay, how can we have this 10 to 15 minutes be as positive as possible? And it's not to say that, there might be all these other times, maybe in the day or some other times in your week, where you are playing with your child or you're playing with your family. I'm not saying to not give corrections and not set limits and boundaries during all those times, or even within special time. It's okay to have some limits, of course, too. I'm just saying to try for those 10 to 15 minutes be as positive as possible. And the ripple effects of that, it just really does make a difference. And I'll speak to those benefits right now. The benefits of having this routine time are listed here. The first one here is that it strengthens the parent or the caregiver child relationship and that bond together. And it also parents often find that they see over time that they're noticing that their child's more cooperative. Maybe even within that time, they're more cooperative. And outside of that time, when that special time isn't happening, they're noticing in other times of the day, their child's more cooperative. And if aggressive behavior is something that is a challenge for you, parents often also find that aggression also decreases when this special time is happening regularly. Also, because it's child-led, and they have your undivided attention. There's no phones, no other screens, nothing else going on. No other, maybe trying to not have any other siblings there that would, take your attention away from this child. It increases their confidence, their self-confidence, and it helps them have a more positive image of themselves, which is so important, and it's what we want too for our kids. And the other thing too that this special time that parents often comment on is that they feel, in addition to feeling more connected with their kid, they have more of an appreciation for their child's interests in their abilities. And so they have an appreciation, and they're learning more about their child, and what they're into, which which is just it's anyway, the benefits and the ripple effects of special time is huge. I'm happy to, Cindy, go ahead.
Well, Sam, I'm sorry, I just wanted to interrupt because something that I really found about special time when we started it was I felt like I was giving Teddy special time like 23 hours out of the day. And so I felt overwhelmed by it. And so to actually say to him, okay, we have 15 minutes a day, also really helped me to stay focused. So it wasn't like I didn't engage with him the rest of the day, but I felt like it was a protected time where I could say, and then I get a break, or then I get some time to myself so I can stay in it for 15 minutes when I don't feel like, it's the entire day.
Absolutely. Thank you for sharing that, Cindy. Thanks for sharing that experience. It's absolutely true. It's true. Lots of parents will say, but I do spend so much time with my kid. But like you said, it's about just having that protected and devoted, like your intention for those 10 to 15 minutes is very different than the rest of the day. You do have all this other time with your child. So no, it's absolutely true. And I know I'm not getting into like certain barriers here and certain things that challenges with special time. I know one is like a common one is transitioning out of that time can be very difficult. I will say that the more it does become a routine and the child understands what's, that it is 10 to 15 minutes, or that it is 10 minutes or 15 minutes, whatever, 20 minutes, whatever it is you decide on, that maybe a timer can help, or that they know what is coming after that special time can be really helpful. Just like, first we're gonna have this special time, and then after special time, it's gonna be time for you to color. It's gonna be time for you to do some music, or it's gonna be time for us to have dinner. Like whatever it is that's coming next can be helpful with those transitions that can be really difficult, especially in this toddler and like young kid child age group. Anyway, all right. Okay, next piece that is very much linked to what we were just talking about with regards to special time is strengthening our compassionate voice, the voice that we have about our children, and what we're thinking about our children, because what we think about our children does have an effect on how we feel, how we respond to them. And then that in turn also has an effect on what they're thinking, how they're feeling, and how they're behaving. So our thoughts, feelings, and behaviors are very connected and very interconnected. And also with other people and with our environment. So, when just talked to special time just a moment ago, that can help strengthen our compassionate voice. That's one tool that helps to have us be have us have a bit more of a compassionate tone, even if we're just talking in our heads about our kid. So some ways to kind of strengthen this muscle, that I like to think of it as a muscle, and that it's important that we exercise this to strengthen it, because again, the effects that we have if this muscle gets stronger, it's again, it ripples out. It makes a huge difference in so many areas. So one way we can do this is just first notice the thoughts that you have about your child. Okay, what are you thinking about them? And I'm not saying to notice it and then feel guilty about all the things that you're thinking about them, and that how they're like, why do they have to be so difficult? Why can't they just be more flexible? Why are they like, yelling, or why are they hitting me? Or like, all of these things that we all think, we all have these thoughts, and that's okay. And that's normal. And at the same time, I'm sure you also have other thoughts that are also very loving or compassionate too, and more gentle. And I'm just one way to strengthen that compassionate voice is to just notice the thoughts that you're having. And then the other piece is to try to practice more of seeing situations from your child's perspective, which can be super difficult, especially if stress is high, or if we're in a rush. It can be hard to do this. So maybe it's hard to do it in the moment. And if it's hard to do it in the moment, try to do it outside of the moment. Whether you have a routine practice of trying to do this before bed every night, or that in the morning before you start your day, or if you have a break in your day, like trying to just practice, like think of a situation when maybe, your child had a hard time, or showed that they were like having some hard emotions about something, or, it was difficult to manage, and just, and think about, your response, what were you thinking at that time, and trying to really see things from their perspective and their worldview. Like I just think about, like, if my daughter like throws a tantrum because she had blueberries in her oatmeal instead of raisins, and I'm just like, I don't need this right now. Like, we need to like get moving here. But to her, she was really looking forward to those raisins, and she did tell me, and I didn't hear, and there was this whole other thing in her mind that I didn't even know at the time. But if we can really try to tune into that, into their worldview, because it is quite different from ours, and tap into that, it can help strengthen and bring more compassion. The other thing that you could try, another way to strengthen this muscle, is to recognize one positive thing your child did in the day. Just one, and it can be small. I know there's some days and it can be really hard to recognize it. But try, even if it's small, and trying to, and maybe it's thinking it, or maybe it was a really hard day, but maybe they brought their plate to the counter, they brought their dinner plate to the counter, or they did get their boots on or their shoes on all by themselves, or whatever it is, thinking it, and then maybe you even want to say it out loud to somebody, maybe a friend, or even to your child or to your partner, or write it down and maybe even post it up. I mean, all of these things can really make a difference. And even for the little kids that we have, like even for our toddlers, even if the verbal piece, there isn't necessarily, they're not necessarily speaking, boy, they know if we're posting something about them and telling them and giving them that compliment, or that we're noticing that positive thing, they feel that, they know it, they know what you're doing. So that's another idea. And another thing that I just wanted to mention here is that it can be really helpful to keep in mind, and this kind of comes from positive psychology, that all of us humans have a negativity bias, because we have the human brain. There's this, like, we just have a negativity bias. And so when we get one piece of criticism, that weighs on us a lot. And research shows that we need 5 compliments to balance and weigh that one criticism. And so think about that for your child, right? Like, that just shows that, like, if there is a criticism there, really try to bring in some of those compliments too throughout the day. Not necessarily in that moment when you give him the criticism, but I'm saying just if you look at the overall week or your day, to try to bring in those compliments, the praise, the encouragement, can be really helpful. Yes, and
I'm so
yeah.
sorry, Sam. I'm just so excited about
No,
all
no, no, I love it. I love it. I love it.
so much of the stuff that we've learned from you. And I would say that those little like micro compliments, like that changed so much for me when I could pick out like just the tiniest thing that he was doing, you know, not right, but you know, that I could say you're really winning with that little tiny thing. And it changed my mindset a ton to be able to say, okay, oh, there is something positive that's going on here. And it was in all those little tiny small things that I could find a lot more positivity. And so thank you for that.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's it. It's all about those little things. It's not about necessarily these big moments or these big wins. Change happens from small things that we do and small steps that we take. Adults, like, and also kids too. So it's really important to recognize that. Absolutely. Thanks, Cindy. And another little tip here, and I just have that sometimes parents have mentioned in groups, is they write like love notes to their kids. You know, again, even if your kids can't read, it doesn't matter. It's just the act that you have taken time to write a little note and hidden it somewhere, hidden under their pillow or under their blanket, or like if your kids go to. Okay. All right. So I think I ended off on the love notes, didn't I? Is that where we, yes. Okay. So the next piece that I just want to talk about too is about strengthening our compassionate voices with ourselves. So not just about our kids, but also how we're talking about us, about what's our inner self-talk. So again, kind of same similar tool strategies that I mentioned before about how we can do this with, you know, about our kids and our inner talk about our children, but with ourselves, I, you know, invite you, observe your self-talk. What is it saying? And maybe how do you encourage yourself? Um, you know, what are some encouraging statements that you say to you, and how, and could you invite a bit more of a gentle and encouraging tone when you talk to yourself? You know, even when there's hard times, or even when you're responding in ways that you don't want to be responding. How are you talking about that afterwards? And could you say it in a way that's, you know, it's okay, you know, mistakes happen, parenting's messy, it's hard, that's normal. And that doesn't mean I'm a bad parent just because it's messy and just because it's hard. Um, you know, it's again trying to be gentle with yourselves, and then within that also recognizing the things that you are doing well. So again, recognizing one positive thing that you did today and trying to do that every day, even if it's a small thing. Just trying to recognize those things. Can again just try to, it can help to exercise that muscle, make it stronger, so that we can be, when we're more compassionate with ourselves, again, the effects of that, the and the difference that can make is huge for not only ourselves but also for our kids too. Okay, so kind of what I was just talking about before really ties into this next positive parenting strategy around emotion coaching. And so what do I mean by emotion coaching? Basically, it means that we want to try to, so as parents, we wear a lot of hats, right? And one of those hats is as a coach or as a trainer. And so one of our jobs is to help coach our children to tolerate those hard and uncomfortable emotions, which is really challenging to do. And it's really challenging to do because not only are we helping to regulate themselves, but we need to regulate us in order to regulate, in order for them to also regulate. So there's many pieces here when we're coaching our children to tolerate their emotions. And one of the emotion coaching strategies is modeling emotion regulation. And here are like some tools or some things that we can draw upon to help us with our own emotion regulation. So first thing, what helps you to feel calm is one, like trying to think and reflect about that. What helps you to feel calm? And maybe what helps you to feel calm in one moment might not help you to feel calm in another moment, but it's important to recognize some of those things and then experiment with certain strategies. And so maybe, some of those strategies might be taking deep breaths. And maybe if that's not that helpful, maybe it's trying to count to 10 to yourself before you're going to respond to your child if you have that time. If there's not a safety concern that you have to react to and get to right away, maybe before you're responding to, let's say, this tantrum and things are kind of safe and okay, trying to count to 10 and just helping yourself to take a pause if you can before. And some of these strategies can help, like the deep breaths, the counting 10 can help with that. And again, just like what I was talking about before, encouraging encouraging self-talk. So trying to have some statements that you're saying to yourself and practicing some, like thinking about, like, sometimes in groups I've talked in the past about like having this like guardian angel, like thinking about like you have a guardian angel on your shoulder, or like a friend who's maybe trying to be that encouraging voice, especially in some of those hard times. Or that, sometimes people find it helpful to pick a statement like, I can do this, I can be calm, and kind of having this kind of mantra that they say to themselves and they practice, not in the heat of the moment, but then once it's in the heat of the moment, it's a bit more accessible. That's a tool that I talk a lot about with kids too. It can be helpful. And also talk about what strategies do help you feel calm with other people. So other people in your life, other family members, talking about those calming strategies with your kids too can be really helpful. And wow, what modeling that is too, if you can talk about that with your kids as well. And then another component of modeling emotion regulation is labeling your emotions if you can. Identifying, giving a name to how you're feeling. That is fantastic modeling and is really helping coach your children in emotion vocabulary. So if you can really try to label those emotions, that's really helpful. And repair work is modeling emotion regulation. So if you didn't handle something how you wanted to, it's okay. Apologizing to your child speaks volumes. When a child has an adult, especially a parent, apologizing to them, it's huge for them. And it's kind of sharing, you're like, it's not necessarily, you're really, the power is not there in your hand there in that situation when you're apologizing. You're really trying to show like, hey, I didn't respond how I wanted to. I'm sorry that I yelled. And I wish I had done this instead. And I was feeling this way. So really trying to come back when it's a calm moment and trying to do some of that repair and talk about what happened. Anything that anyone wants to jump in or say about that, or should I keep going? All right. Another piece of emotion coaching is validating. So I'm also mindful. I know we have a few minutes till 9. I hope people can stay on. I'm really sorry for all these like internet glitches and everything. My apologies. So yeah, validation is a very important emotion coaching tool. This can be, so actually first I want to say validation does not mean you're approving of the behavior that happened. Validation means, I am hearing you and I'm hearing how you are feeling, because all feelings are okay and normal. And we're not going to like challenge somebody on how they felt. It's important to hear them and how they're feeling about it. So validate the feeling, and you can do this non-verbally. You don't have to use words necessarily. You can, you can do it with like a pat on the back, a hug, depending on your kid. Sometimes that sets kids off and you can't do it in certain moments. So you have to kind of, again, experiment with some of these things and see. But again, showing that they have your attention is really important. And some ways, some verbal statements that you can say is, you can say, I hear you, I hear you. If they're trying to talk with you about something, let's say, and they're like really upset or whatever it is, you can say, I hear you. And maybe if they're not verbal and they're just like having this like crying tantrum, you can just say, show again that you're there, that you're listening. And you can say, I see that you're feeling something right now. Take a moment to feel it. Again, we want to try to name it that this is coming up for them. And when we name it, I don't know if some people are familiar with Dan Siegel's work, but he has a couple great books called or a number of books. A couple of them that I often recommend are The Whole Brain Child and No Drama Discipline. And he talks about name it to tame it, or name it to frame it. And so it's really trying to just name what is happening and name that they are having an emotion come up for them. And sometimes you can tentatively, with a tentative kind of curious stance, suggest what that feeling might be, especially if kids aren't verbal and aren't saying, and even if they are verbal, sometimes it's really hard for kids to say how they're feeling. And so I often really suggest saying, you're feeling frustrated or you're feeling disappointed, and really trying to say 3 becauses after you say you feel. So saying, and this comes kind of from like an emotion focused therapy technique, but it's you're feeling frustrated because you're feeling frustrated because your sister took that truck away from you without asking, and because you really wanted to play with it, because you really like that it like moves back and forth on its own, or whatever it is, like you want to try when you say 3 because, I mean, this is a tip not to just use with your kids, you can use it with anybody in your life. It shows the other person that you really get what it is that they're experiencing right now. And nowhere in that statement are you approving of anything that they hit their sister after taking that truck. I'm not approving of hitting, but I am seeing that this was a very frustrating time and they had a really hard time with communicating that feeling and managing it, which is then why the behavior comes out. So typically when we're seeing certain behaviors, it's really just showing us they are having a challenge with communicating and managing what is going on inside of them. And again, going back to kind of that worldview piece, I was like really trying to get into your child's worldview. Like in these certain situations, it's really helpful to see like, yeah, okay, a truck might not be that important to us, or like, when a fork gets torn down, we can just put the fork back up. Like, why are you getting so upset about it? Really trying to see like, like, but to your child, like it's a big deal for them. And the other thing that I just wanted to say to that point about the because is 3 times. You can also use ands too, is another one, but the becauses kind of help prompt us to kind of try to push to get to some more of that reasoning and really avoid the butting. Yeah, you feel this way, but da 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 da. No buts. That doesn't help me. When I'm frustrated and when I hear a but, I don't want to talk to the other person on the other side anymore. Another point that I just want to raise too about validation is to really when those big emotions come up, try to resist problem solving right away. Just really, the validation's got to come first in order to even think about problem solving. And then maybe the problem solving doesn't even come at all. But validation's it's key. And the other piece here too, the benefits to emotion coaching, there are many. It helps to de-escalate. It helps the child to pause, to learn this skill of pausing and slowing down. Very important life skill, and one that often adults, we also need to learn and be reminded of as well. The other benefit of emotion coaching is that it models the empathy. This life skill that we want our children to be developing and using. So we want to model that for them so that they know how to they can use it. And it increases cooperation also, and it strengthens, again, the parent-child relationship. I know I've spoken to those 2 points. Something that I just forgot to mention, I realize, is like, I know I was talking about modeling that self-regulation. I just wanted to make the point that when we do model that self-regulation, it's contagious. Like, our child will co-regulate with us. When they're seeing us regulate ourselves, that then is a just automatic trigger because they're so connected with us. In infancy, we see that with them oftentimes, like in that baby stage, but that's like that co-regulation is still a powerful tool throughout these younger years into adolescence. They're developing this, so they really take our cues and our tone, and the way we are regulating our emotions. It's contagious. So that modeling is I just wanted to emphasize that again. Lastly, I'll just speak to this quickly. These are just a few quick tips just with regards to when we give instructions and when we set limits. So these are just some tips with how to do it in an effective way. So maybe some of you have already heard of kind of trying to use when then or first then. So yeah, when you put the blocks in the bin, then we can have a snack. Really trying to clearly say, again, what needs to be done right now, and then what needs to happen and what they can expect. And trying to put the thing that's more undesirable first and the thing that's more desirable at the end. Again, all of these tools and strategies that I'm talking about, they don't work every time. They're not bulletproof. They're not a magic bullet, and they're not bulletproof. Like, you're not necessarily going to get compliance every time or cooperation every time. But the more we use it, you might see a trend overall that there is an increase in cooperation. And the other thing too is, when we're trying certain things out, don't just like throw it out the window if it doesn't work the first time. Try it a handful of times and give it some tweaks and see and see if it's giving you any results. The other thing with giving an instruction or setting a limit, proximity really helps. When you can get down to your child's level, some of that eye contact, being close, that can really help, rather than like shouting from upstairs to downstairs about what it is that they need to do, or from the kitchen to the living room. And trying to incorporate play as much as possible. Brushing teeth can be hard. That's like one thing I know for me in my house, it's a hard thing. But when I have more capacity and my, cup is filled up, so to speak, then I can access a bit more of that playfulness and kind of bring into like the toothbrush, maybe talking at my kids, and there's like bring in some puppet work there a little bit, but trying to bring in some playfulness into those routines that can be challenging sometimes. Giving choices when possible is really helpful, and trying to pick your battles. So just really trying to ask yourself, is this really necessary? Do I actually have the energy to like follow through with this right now? And does my kid, like, where are they at? Are they like just super tired and cranky and hungry? Like, now's not the time to give an instruction or set a limit. Routines can really help also to minimize the amount of instructions you have to give. That takes time, takes training. All of this takes like really like thinking about it as like you're training your child. It doesn't come easily the first time. And so it often takes like a lot of repetition in order to see some gains and some wins happening. So I think that's it for me in terms of content that I wanted to share with you all. So maybe we can open it up to questions. I'll stop sharing my screen just so that I can see everybody. Also, did that resonate with people? Did anyone find any of that useful? Any comments, any questions at all?
I don't know if you can see, Sam, but there is a great question in the chat already.
Okay. I can't, because I went off and then came on, so I like can't see any of the chat history.
Okay, great. So I'm going to read it to you.
Great.
It said, when there are two kids, should the special time be taken for each one, or can it be shared? I have two kids and both want me at the same time all the time. So just wondering what would be the best way.
Absolutely. Great question. Common one, and it's a common challenge. So so the recommendation would be if you can do it individually, again, it's trying to think about making it as realistic as possible. So like again, thinking of it as 10 minutes, and of course your kids, especially when they're little, like I imagine, I don't know what the ages of these two children are, but like they they do want you all the time. And sometimes what happens too with siblings is they see that one is getting the time and they want that time with you too. So there's like this competition kind of. If potentially, I don't know if there's someone else potentially in the home with you, like another adult, that's able to help out with the other child, or a friend or another caregiver somehow that could help with that time, um, for that 10 minutes for you to have that time with one. And then also I would recommend, like, it can be helpful to make it clear to both kids that, you know, one gets one time and then we switch. Then we have our time together. You know, then we get that time while the other one's doing something else. I don't know how independent the children are that you're, who asked this question. I don't know if anyone wants to share, but if they're able to do an activity for 10 minutes, I don't know if there's something that keeps their interest for 10 minutes that they could do. I don't know if screen time is an option. Sometimes people go to that too. And I know everybody has mixed feelings about screen time, but that is an option to say, like, you know what? Yeah, 10 minutes they can watch this show, or they can have a video call with so and so, and I can have like 10 minutes with this other child. Those are some ideas. I don't know if any of that was helpful to the person who asked the question, or if anybody, if they want to comment, or yeah, I know it's challenging, especially if if you're single parenting too, it's really tough. And sometimes parents do it at bedtime. If the younger one goes down earlier, that then the older one gets that 10 minutes of time before bed. And so, hopefully it's not this like rambunctious 10 minutes of activity, but like maybe it is reading a book, and that's, if that's what your child's choosing, or maybe it's playing a quiet game of some sort, or whatever it is. But that's another idea too that sometimes other parents have shared in past groups, is doing it at that bedtime time. Yeah. Helpful, unhelpful?
I think that's very helpful.
Okay.
Does anybody else have any more questions that you want to ask? I have a general one, but if anybody else has one first, I've been doing all the talking. Everyone's so quiet. Wow, my goodness. Well, I guess my general question, Sam, I guess, is for parents how to really. I mean, sometimes this can feel a bit overwhelming. Like it's like, oh my God, I have to do more. I have to do more work
Mm-hmm.
right now when all I can do is like try to get through the day.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm just wondering how parents can help themselves through all of this to feel protected and to not feel like so much like everything's on them.
For sure.
It is on you. You're all raising humans, but you know what I'm saying.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes, absolutely. I think, I mean, I would, again, it's like going back to that point that we were making before about starting small and like recognizing what it is you're doing. That would be kind of like this spot where I would start at, is recognizing, again, one thing that you're doing and one thing that your kid's doing well, and then going from there. And like, I know that might sound, I don't know if that sounds like too basic. I mean, even that though, to some parents can seem hard, because it's like, well, what am I going to do? Because like at the end of the day, I'm so exhausted. I don't want to think about one thing that I did and one thing that they did, or what. But I would start there. I mean, the other thing that I just think that, again, like seeing what it is that you are doing, we often overlook that so much because we are human, because I was talking, like, when I was talking about that negativity bias. So it's really, again, it's when we can recognize what we are doing, it is easier to build on that. So that would be kind of the first starting point. And then I would kind of then go to that special time piece, that's trying to see how can that happen, is there a way that, and maybe again, maybe it's not daily, but maybe there's some way that can happen a bit in the week. And again, trying to be realistic about that. Is that helpful?
I guess I have a question as well, and it's just in terms of, especially with the pandemic, and we've all been kind of cooped up all together, and I know things are opening up a little bit now, but when you're feeling just personally completely overwhelmed by everything, like you just have nothing else to give, and you have a child or your children are wanting something from you, what would be a good suggestion in terms of how you respond in that moment when you feel drained and like you don't have anything else to give to them in that moment? What would be a good way to respond to them that would take care of everyone in the room so that you have that little kind of safe space and you're not disregarding them or what their needs are, but you're also caring for yourself?
Mm-hmm. Well, great question. And I think that's one I know I can relate to so much, to that, to the picture you're painting there. And I would say to try to tap into what it is that you need in that moment. And is it that, because if you're tapping into what you need, that, and you're trying to, like, let's say, give yourself a bit of space if you can, or maybe you can't give yourself space, depending again on the age of the kids and the situation, and maybe you still have to be in the same room as them. How can you get that space if that's something that you need? Some time to be quiet or time to be with yourself, even for 5 to 10 minutes. Again, is it like, I don't want to keep saying screens, but I am going to resort, like, I am going to mention that idea because I think sometimes we can be hard on ourselves with the screen time piece. And I've often heard that from parents with feeling like guilty about screens, but sometimes it's okay to use them, I think. And maybe it's trying to, again, when we can focus on what we need, we have to remember that does impact our kid and what they need. We are tending to them by tending to our needs. And I think it also is a cue to us to remember, okay, you know what? I had this time. I need to take a moment after the kids are in bed to think about what I need to fill up my cup and what's realistic. What can I do? Because, I keep coming back to this. This was a really hard moment. And, you know, when I talk about special time, but with our kids, it's also important for us to have that time too, for us, whether it's care for ourselves, like, taking care of ourselves in some ways and what we need. But parents, it's so hard because parenting is it's so easy to overlook what we need, right? Because of how much is coming at us in the day and what's being asked of us constantly. But yeah, it can be helpful to even, I know some people have talked about where they have friends or family, like somebody who's not in the home, but they check in with them once a week to be like, how are you doing today? Where's your self-care at today? What have you done for self-care? Just to check in about it as a cue, because sometimes it can be hard for us to remember to do that. Yeah.
I like giving myself a good old time out. I do that quite often.
Absolutely. And yeah, if you can walking away and giving yourself a timeout is totally okay. And sometimes parents wonder if they have, like, if they can give themselves permission to do that, Again, I know it's hard depending on, like, developmentally where your children are at and if you can do that. But yeah, like, giving yourself a timeout And again, it's great modeling of emotion regulation if you do that. Yeah.
Yeah, sometimes I just know that I can come up with a better solution if I just give myself 5 minutes. And I'll set a timer, like I'll set a timer for my son to hear as well, to know that I'm done. So
That's
that
great too.
I can just say like, oh, so he knows that I've had the time to calm down and to really think about how I'm going to respond to him rather than just, responding emotionally.
Absolutely.
So I think, Wendy, you could give yourself a couple of time notes. I'm just saying.
Okay, I'll take that under consideration. It's hard. It's hard to give yourself permission when you're feeling that you are somehow failing your child by needing that space for yourself. But especially these last 2 years when it's just a constant, you don't have those moments where you're away or you can kind of gather yourself or recharge kind of individually. That my daughter's obviously at a different stage. She's a teenager, but it's still, you still have that kind of guilt, I think, that's built into parenting, where it's recognizing that you have to take that time to fill your cup, as you said.
The thing, just with regards to that guilt piece, I think it's important to remember too that, again, when we're talking about like being more compassionate with ourselves, being more gentle, especially when we're hearing that guilt voice come, and we're hearing that, and that's very loud. That's it. It can be really big sometimes. Trying to remember, like, our kids do, they do, like, there is that foundation there in the relationship that we have, and if we are focusing on, again, on that relationship and the bond that we have with our kids, when we make mistakes, or if we blow up, or if we feel guilty about how we responded or what we did or didn't intend to or whatever, you got that foundation there to fall back on.
Right.
And your kids forgive you for that, and they bounce back from that. We really need to remember that too. And I think, again, that's also something that I think we often forget as parents, because we can be really hard on ourselves. But it's really important to remember, again, all that we're doing, and that, it's the same if, like, it was the reverse and someone, like a very good friend or family member, or like, if or your child, right? Like, if there was something, if they if a mistake was made or behavior was done, or there's something was said that was hurtful or whatever, when there is a strong foundation there, the repair can happen, and you work through it and get past it, and wow, what learning is that, and again, what growth happens from that. Anyway, just some of those things that can be helpful to remember. Yeah. I did get a question about if, just given with the pandemic and a lot of isolation that we all have been feeling, I'm sure, or like maybe some of us more than others, and not being able to connect with friends and family as much from time to time. There was a question that came in about if I think that this isolation period that we've had, if it's bad for our children's independence in the future. And great question. I think it's hard to say right now. I think that there's so much that goes into building our child's independence and sense of, in those independent skills. And I don't know if sure, absolutely, the isolation period definitely has effects on all of us in different ways, but it's hard to say, I think, if that directly, I think, has an effect in that necessarily, because I think those independence skills can still be built up and taught in various ways. Something that I didn't mention that I think is kind of a visual that I find helpful, that I learned from a positive parenting expert out there. Her name's Amy McCready, and she talks about kind of these two buckets that kids have. And one is, a power attention bucket. So again, when I talked about special time, like filling that attention bucket up. and kind of, or like, I don't know if people know the concept of like a love tank from like love languages, filling up that love tank. And when that gets filled up, wow, the ripple effects of that are huge. And then also when those hard moments happen, we have that to fall back on, like I was saying before. But kids also have a power bucket. And so we can fill that too in our days, even with the little ones, in what ways can we give them some responsibilities and that are developmentally appropriate, or some things that help to give them a sense of agency and power in the family or in the parent-child relationship. And that's where, like, again, with a special time, it's kind of like you're filling both buckets up with that time because it's child directed. They're feeling like they've got the power there. And then you're also filling up the attention bucket. And so, yeah, so just with regards to that question about, if this isolation period is impacting independence, I just think like there's other ways that children are gaining independent skills. And I don't know, I'm a bit more optimistic about it, but yes, but I just think there's so many factors that we need to think about with regards to that.
Great. Well, I'm conscious of the time. I know it's getting a little bit late and, we get Zoom weary for sure, but thank you, Sam. Thank you for sticking it out.
I'm so sorry. Thanks for everybody for staying on longer. I know this went longer than it was planned, but thank you all for staying on and coming. And
can I just say something?
Yeah.
I just want to say that this was I wanted to thank Cindy for setting this up and for taking the time to introduce us to Sam. This was extremely helpful. I have a 15-month-old, so I'm not quite there yet. So I have but I'm setting up that foundation that you're speaking of. And I do truly believe when you do set up that foundation, it does reflect back on you, because my 15-month-old is very, very soft, very kind. And I can be, as a parent, hard on myself at times. But then people say, but Kelly, look at how well he's doing. And I'm like, oh yeah, that's because of me. That's because of my husband and I, the time and giving him that 15-minute time. It really, what you're saying, there is truth. And we do give him that time every single evening. And he's our only son right now. And we do notice that based on that foundation, it's reflected back on us in a positive way. So you're absolutely right when it comes to that.
That's great to hear.
And the cadence and the tone and the time, I totally agree. And I'm living through it right now. You do notice when you're calm, they're calm. When you're heightened, they get heightened. So if you really truly, like what Wendy was saying, I find when you feel guilty, you really truly, and I had to do this, train my brain, take 5 minutes and walk away and train my brain to self-reflect and think about myself and how I go about certain situations. It's not easy though, to train your brain to do that.
Absolutely.
I had to train myself, literally train myself to think that way. It wasn't easy, but I did it. It's not, but it takes time though. It all takes time.
Absolutely. Thanks for
sharing. I just want to say this was fantastic. This was really, really great. Thank you.
Great. Great. Thank you.
And thank you, Cindy, and thank you, Wendy, for this.
You are more than welcome. Thank you for being here, Kelly. Yay. So thanks everyone. Thanks for joining. Take care of yourselves tonight and always. Yeah, thank you. Yes, it's been really fantastic. So thanks, Sam. I love you, and I hope we can do it again sometime.
Yeah, this is great. Thank you so much, everybody. And yeah, feel free to reach out. I wrote my email in the chat there. Like, don't hesitate to reach out to me by email. And it was a pleasure to be with you all. And yeah, and thank you for your patience. Please, thank you so much and for being here. Yes. And thanks, Wendy and Cindy.
Thank you, Sam. Thank you so much. Thank you, everyone. And we will send you a link as well.
Yes. Oh, here's my kitty cat.
Oh, you know what I forgot to mention? Books. I had book recommendations. Can I just mention two?
Yes.
I meant to say that at the end. One book that basically I have at my bedside is How to Talk So Little Kids Will Listen. I actually have the book here. It's for like ages 2 to 7. So like that kind of like anyway, it's very practical tips and tools in here. I know I mentioned The Incredible Years is another one. And Dan Siegel's like The Whole Branch. I mean, there's a number of positive parenting books out there, but these are some of the ones that I really draw upon a lot, and that parents often find really useful and helpful, and like easy reads, you know, something that you can just like pick up and like open up one page and look at it, and it can be helpful. So, and this is based off of like, there's like a main book called How to Talk So Kids Will Listen and Listen So Kids Will Talk. Yes. But anyway, yes, sorry, I meant to mention that. Glad I just got that in there.
Yeah, we can send it out in an email too.
Awesome. Great.
My cat's being very cute. All right, go get some sleep, everybody.
Thank you, everyone. Thank you so much, Sam.
Thank you. Take care.
Thank you.
Good night, everyone.